What we're going to talk about today is parties' opening statement. And when we deal with that, we're primarily going to look at the way in which they are positioned in the past. We're going to hear a lot of information about how they were wronged, how the situation was terrible, a lot of victimization, language kind of things. But before we get too far into that, let's review some of our concepts, like definition of mediation. We put this at the beginning of each presentation, just in case this is the one you pulled off the shelf because you had a particular interest in parties' opening statement as a skill set. So let's review. Mediation is a process that empowers people to make an informed decision in their own best interest. And early on in the process stages, we're primarily focusing on that empowerment issue, how to work the process in a way that empowers parties. As we move forward through the steps, then we'll start generating options. It will create informed decision-making process and then an empowerment to make a final decision in the agreement writing stage. When we look at the steps of the process, these are the steps we go through. Mediator's opening statement we've already done. Now we're focusing on parties' opening statement. We call that POS. Mediator's opening statement, MOS. We have initials for each one going through. Joint discussion. Next in the process, JD, caucus with both parties reconvening together, and then agreement writing, where the embodiment or the attainment of that empowerment process. When we look at the mediation process itself, going through at least the first three steps, there's a temporal orientation that's associated with this. In POS, we pretty much are focusing on the past. When we get to JD, joint discussion, we're going to be moving into the present. And then when we get to caucus, we're going to be pushing or nudging or luring, enticing, whatever word you want to use, into the future for the parties. So the temporal progression looks something like this. You've got a past, parties' opening statement. We're spending a great deal of time in the past, primarily focusing there. But then when we get to joint discussion, we're going to still spend some time in the past, but move beyond that, more into the present, the power of the present focus. And then the last one, still we can go back to the past, still deal with present issues, but we're pushing it into the direction, trying to move the parties into a forward-looking direction. So there's a temporal orientation with each of these steps. All right. We've gotten finished with our opening statement. It's now time to hear an opening statement from each of the parties. I need a transition. I've finished my opening statement. Here's the transition we use. If there are no more questions, remember I ended my opening statement with, do you have any questions about the process? If there are no more questions, and there may not have been any at all, then I would like to hear from each of you. Then I'm going to turn to the complainant and say, since you brought this issue to the table, I would like to hear from you first, okay? And then I'm going to ask that person specifically, please tell us why we're here and what you would like to see happen. That's my transition for each side in the beginning of the opening statement. Now it's time for them to talk. And that's what parties' opening statement is designed to do. There's two aspects to this. One, for the party, two for the mediator. The primary focus now for the parties is an opportunity to talk. Why? We're asking the complainant to go first. We're going to talk about why and how. The complainant goes first, a number of different reasons. First of all, if I haven't done the intake, someone else has done the intake, then I've come to the table with no information. Very little information has been shared in terms of I have a file, there's a short description, I don't have any background about either of these people. So I'm relying on them to explain why I'm here, why they're here, what we're going to be talking about. So it's helpful to start with the complainant, the one who filed the complaint, the one who started this process going. So I'm going to ask them to go first. Oftentimes, it's not unusual in an EEO case for a supervisor to not really know the details of why they're there. They've got some vague notion. So if you start with them, they go, I don't know why I'm here. They started this, and you're back to the complainant anyways. So we're going to turn to the complainant, ask them to go first, and it's going to be helpful for me to get information, as I say, because I may not know anything. If I've done the intake, then I've gotten some information, but remember we've tried to limit that information so that I'm not getting too much data and starting to formulate decisions, or if I get too much information and too much data, it could cloud the way I use the process. I'm not watching the process. I end up manipulating them or steps in the process in order what I think the data needs, from the data that I've gathered. So I'm a third-party neutral. The process needs to keep its integrity, so we go with the complainant first. The other reason to just go ahead and flat out state the complainant goes first, we're going to move with the complainant first, is let's say I do get a lot of information. Let's say I've formulated now an opinion from gathering information from both of them in the intake. It is rare, but it's acceptable to let a respondent go first. I've personally never done it, but some mediators have based on information. But here's the danger. Let's say I've gathered information in the intake. I've heard some opinion from the respondent. And now I've got a clear understanding of what this case looks like. So I now know that there's some critical information that the respondent has that the complainant doesn't, and if the complainant just knew or understood, we wouldn't be here, or at least we wouldn't have to be here so long. So what do I end up doing? I end up circumventing the process, and I turn to the respondent in the hopes of getting this information on the table. We haven't done any venting, we haven't done any listening, nothing, and here I'm going to try to get a shortcut to this thing. The shortcut is the process. There are no other shortcuts. Any other kind of shortcuts you try to do risks so many other different dynamics at this table. So the best recommendation, go ahead, turn to the complainant. Complainant goes first. Why? I didn't make a decision. With the other scenario and the information I have from the respondent, I'm making a decision. I'm risking my neutrality. Be careful. The process calls for the complainant to go first. If anybody challenges you, just say that. Well, the process calls for the complainant to go first. Or remember the principles we talked about? Blame it on the process. Blame it on yourself. We cover those more detail in troubleshooting, but I can do that here as well. Complainant goes first. Why? Process calls for it. Well, why? Because it's going to be helpful to me. So that's the how and the why in terms of asking the complainant to go first. We're going to give them a chance to talk. And this may really be the first time that a party, a complainant, or even a respondent for that matter, has had an opportunity to talk about and get off their chest all of the elements involved here. This isn't standing in the break room talking with other employees where you're trying to build up a coalition. That's griping. This is an opportunity to say what happened, the impact it had on them, how they felt about it. And we're going to do this in uninterrupted fashion, primarily, again, why and how, primarily to create an environment so that you can tell me as a complainant what's going on, why we're here, what you would like to see happen, what impact did it have on you, and I will listen to you. That can be very empowering. So I'm going to deal with the interruptions, letting them have free space. I'm not even going to interrupt. No one is going to interrupt this conversation. Because if I don't create this environment this way, if I don't have an opportunity of uninterruption, I run the risk of one-upmanship. I run the risk of these people escalating, damaging communication. I mean, face it, the reason you're here at the head of this table as a third-party neutral is because they haven't been able to deal with this. They're in essence saying, we need help. Or they've turned to the program, and the program has said, if you need help, we have someone here. There's nothing wrong with needing the help. There's nothing wrong with the communication being blocked. That's normal. That's natural. But face it, you're here to help them communicate. An uninterrupted time of the process helps them get it off their chest, helps them vent a little bit without a one-upmanship or without the escalating of damaged communication, and can create that environment of moving through the venting so that we have a better negotiation time later on. So there's a whole lot already going on here in terms of negotiation, in terms of empowerment, just in the listening stage. So how do I go about handling interruptions? Again, we'll address this in more detail with troubleshooting, but we're going to do the LLI, the lowest level of intervention. Just as a reminder, you know, in the martial arts, the black belt is trained to kill. Their hands, they know so many different ways of killing somebody, but they are disciplined and trained to use the lowest level of intervention to stop the conflict. That's the discipline they are trained with and the responsibility they have with the training to kill someone. So we want to use a similar type situation. Lowest level of intervention, meaning I don't want to intervene too much in here. I want to use my lowest level of intervention to keep the process moving. Again, if I start raising the level of intervention too high, stepping in too soon or too much, I risk my neutrality a little bit, and I affect the dynamics of what's going on between the two people. So they're interrupting. The lowest level, I can be sitting here listening to the complainant talk, my body language, eye contact, all focused on the complainant, and I start hearing comments from the respondent. The lowest level would be to ignore it. Just pay no attention to it whatsoever. I mean, have you ever been in a situation, say in the office or the break room, where someone's given a snide remark, or they're trying to goad you, or they're going to get your goat, or they're going to small little cut down? You just ignore it. Pay no attention, like you didn't even hear it. You know, keep stirring the coffee, don't even look up, right? That can kind of take the wind out of their sail, kind of diffuse the situation. Same thing's going on here. I'm not going to pay any attention to the interruption. I'm going to ignore it completely. That can send a signal. Now, if that doesn't work, another level of intervention would be a nonverbal. I can start to communicate without saying anything, either with my hand, a gesture. I can hold up, one moment, or hold on just a minute. I've seen mediators tap the middle of the table, and I can do a lot of that without even moving. If I turn and engage the respondent with my eye contact, I run the risk of giving them permission to talk. But the effective nonverbal is to kind of the look over the glasses, There's this look you can give that kind of shuts people. If you have kids, I've seen a middle school teacher shut down an entire bus of middle school kids. Noisy, rowdy middle school kids stand up and look, just that look, everybody calm down. So that look can be a powerful nonverbal link as well. In terms of communicating to them, it's not your turn to talk. If I have to, I've got the verbal level of intervention. I can say something. Now, if I'm going to say something, this is a more intrusive level. So I'm literally going to stop listening. I'm going to turn my chair back to the middle. I'm going to say, excuse me, let me interrupt you both for a moment. Now remember, I said this was uninterrupted, so now I'm breaking the rule in order to get us back on process. Let me interrupt you both here for a moment. If you recall in my opening statement, I said that this would be an uninterrupted time. Now I'm going to turn to the principal, blame it on the process, blame it on myself. The process calls for this to be an uninterrupted time. It's going to be helpful to me to get this information in an uninterrupted fashion. Then I'm going to turn to the respondent and say, what you have to say is very important to me. If you could jot those things down, we're going to have a chance in just a moment to hear your opening statement, and I want to make sure we cover everything that's important to you. Now look what I've accomplished with that wording, that phrasing. And you don't have to say all of that. Just say whatever you need to in order to stop the interruption and move forward. But it's all there in case you do need it. But look what I've done. Rather than stopping the interruption by turning around and saying, now boys, right, listen, you promised or you agreed in the opening statement that this would be uninterrupted, I'm starting to hand slap. I'm starting to draw attention to the negative behavior, and now I'm about to launch into some appeal or demand to get them to stop. But by doing it the other way, I've put an appeal to the process, I've made an appeal to help for myself, but I've also communicated to the respondent that what they have to say is important to me. I'm not just ignoring them, and this focused attention over here isn't ultimately going to exclude them. You're going to get a chance to talk. I'm very interested in what you have to say. So I valued them, kind of communicated that I'm not lessening them by turning over here. It's a much more effective way of dealing with behavior and keeping the process going rather than any hand slapping. Now, if things get out of hand, there are other levels of intervention. They're really high and they're extreme. I can caucus, I can privately meet, and I will. I think in all the mediations I've ever done, I may have done that once or twice where I've had to separate the parties, sit down and talk to them a little bit privately about the interruption. My goal at this point is primarily to get us back on track. I can rehearse the process, blame it on the process, blame it on myself, but now that I'm alone with them, I can also cover some areas that I couldn't cover with both of them in the room. I can start to tease out a level of investment that each party might have. Why are you here? What did you hope to accomplish? What's going to happen here today if this doesn't settle? I can start to plant some seeds in their minds about, do I really want to work this out here today, or do I want to go through the EEO process or the grievance process, or whatever formalized step is next? I can start to plant those seeds and ask those questions now. Trying to measure a level of investment, do you think we're going to be able to accomplish that if we can't go through the process here today? Now, the highest level of intervention is we're stopping the mediation. I will just pack up my books and go home. I've never had to do that. That is the highest level. It's most intrusive. I've stepped in. I've made a decision. I've taken away. I've affected the dynamics. But if they're not willing to follow the process, there's nothing here for them. I'm not going to make a decision. I'm not going to solve their problems. I'm not going to pass judgment on either one of them. The only tool I have to offer these two parties in conflict is the process. The process will walk them through an empowerment stage, an option generating stage, so that they can make an informed decision. If they're not willing to allow the process to do that, there's nothing wrong with the process. The parties are not cooperating. The process is fine. Pack it up and go home. Like I said, I've never had to do that. So use the lowest level of intervention that you can in order to keep things moving in terms of the process. I can ignore. I can use nonverbal. I can say something. I can meet privately with them. I can stop the process. You can decide which is going to be the most effective, and mix and match as you go if you need to. Mix a verbal with a nonverbal, ignore a little bit, and then maybe say whatever's necessary to keep the process moving. All right? Uninterrupted. Let's talk about your role. It's a time to listen. You are going to sit there. You are going to listen to both parties one at a time, uninterrupted fashion, for as long as they need to talk. This is part of the empowerment. I will listen to you. So I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to say anything to them. I'm not going to step in and ask questions. Now, they may say something that's not clear to me. I've been in this business for 47 years, and excuse me, you mean this office or this agency? How long? I may have a lot of questions, but now is not the time to ask them. I will listen to you means I'm not going to interrupt either. If I have to, I'll leave a blank spot in my notes. I'll put a question mark. I'll put a star. Something to remind me to come back and cover that. I'm not going to dialogue with them now, so I don't interrupt either. My body language communicates I'm listening. I'm going to sit on the edge of my seat. I'm going to put my feet flat on the floor. I'm going to lean forward, maybe on my arms, elbow on the table, in front of my notes. Eye contact with the complainant or the respondent, whoever it is. I am listening to you. The only time I'm really taking my eyes off is when I'm jotting down my notes, which is another way to communicate I'm listening. You want to be careful with your notes. Don't write out paragraph form. Don't dictate what they're saying. Jot down short little phrases that are designed to spark your memory. Now, the goal here isn't to get it all right. There's not going to be a quiz at the end of this. You're about to summarize their opening statements. If you miss something, that's fine. Don't worry about it. The goal isn't, yeah, I heard you and I got it all perfect. That's not the point. I'm communicating. I'm listening to you. I'm jotting down things to remind myself. That's it. We'll go over notes in, a little bit more. But that whole sense of empowering, I will listen to you. When someone feels heard, they're able to get it off their chest. They're able to go ahead and delve into the past and talk about its impact. When they're finished, they're ready to move forward. A lot of times people stay stuck in conflict communication because they never felt heard, and they're not ready to move forward. That's one of your roles here as far as, especially during parties' opening statement. So let's look back at notes again. How do we communicate listening? What we recommend is you just draw a line down the middle of the page, right? Complaining on one side, responding on the other. Now, I write their names across the top. I have difficulty with remembering names, so I put their names across the top so I remember who they are, and I can just glance down and remember their names. And then I've got just enough room to jot down ideas. Let me give you an example. In our non-selection scenario that we've gone through, this is a situation where an employee had applied for a GS-12 position. Now, albeit we find out in the opening statement he's a GS-9. It's an assistant supervisor position that he's applied for. He didn't get it. He's upset about it, and that's why we're here. He's filed an EEO on this. And this looks like my notes. I've gotten his opening statement. His opening statement may have been 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes, but I've just jotted down the things that will help me remember so that I can capture some key ideas. Am I going to capture all his key ideas? Am I going to miss something? I might, but that's okay at this point. I can always cover those in joint discussion. For example, notice, Assistant Supervisor GS-12 position. That's what he's applied for. He's getting paid at a GS-9. One of the things that's missing from my notes, he's had perfect attendance for 2 years. One of the things that's missing, I don't know how long he's been employed there. Right? Has he been employed there 2 years? Has he been employed there 4 years? 15? I have no idea. He's either hasn't told me or he told me and I missed it. That's okay, it's missing in my notes. I can notice the gap and in joint discussion, ask the question. I will not, during party's opening statement, stop and say, oh, excuse me, you said you've been perfect attendance for 2 years. How long have you been in the department? Now's not the time. Do I need the information? Maybe, but now's not the time. I'm not going to interrupt. Perfect attendance. He's been loyal, and he feels like his loyalty is very important to the department. He's had an evaluation and gotten a raise. I mean, all that's been very important. He's felt like he's gone the extra mile. He's paid the price to the agency. And what did he get for it? He got ignored, pushed aside. They hired somebody for this position from an outside agency, from the corporate world. Miss K was the person they hired. She worked at Cisco Systems. So here's someone, a loyal employee, perfect attendance, going the extra mile, and is now pushed aside. So morale's down. Morale's down in the office because several things, his attitude's not helping at all. He recognizes morale is down, and he says things are even going to get worse. And I hope that that fancy-dancy Miss K, somebody from Cisco Systems, can do something, because if she can't, it's going to get worse here. Now, Cisco Systems lady, Miss K, worked at Cisco for 2 years, high management position, but before that she taught in a university management level courses. And now he's upset because she has theory, he has work experience, and it looks as though the agency has valued her theory, classroom work, book learning, over his hard work and experience in the agency. He knows more about this department than anybody. He should have gotten that job. Notice there's a lot of emotion associated in the opening statement, and most of it's about the past. But I've written down things, and just like this, symbols, arrows, stars, something to communicate to me what I need to remember. And then last thing, he reiterates several times that the evaluation and the attendance should have counted for something. And he's very upset that it didn't. Those are my complainant notes. That's it. That's all it looks like. If it goes over another page, I'll just roll the page over, draw another line, and keep jotting down. Respondent notes. Let's end this first. I've got the complainant. He's finished his opening statement. I've jotted down my notes. There's a moment of silence. Sounds like he's kind of finished. It's gotten it all out. I'll turn to him and ask this question in just this word, just this wording. Is there anything else you would like to add at this time? Now, he may go on for another 20 minutes. He may go on for another 30 minutes. I just get back into my listening mode, jotting my notes down, keep going. More often than not, when they keep going, they end up repeating themselves, and that's okay. I can put a star or a check by the number of times they've repeated something, because that communicates to me that it's important. But more often than not, is there anything else you'd like to add at this time? No, I'm finished. And I stop, thank you for your opening statement, and I turn to the next party, in this case, the respondent. And we're going to start the respondent's opening statement. Now, I'm going to turn to them and say, please tell us why we're here, what you'd like to see happen, and now they start. Now notice, the wording I've gotten, tell us why you're here and what you'd like to see happen. There's two aspects to that. One, the past, why are we here? What you would like to see happen is a future-oriented question. 9 times out of 10, parties never address it in an opening statement. So I end up with this blank spot. You noticed in complainant's notes, there's nothing about what he wants to see happen because he didn't say anything. You're going to see the same thing in the respondent notes. They have difficulty talking about the future yet because they're positioned in the past. So here's his notes. Actually, it's a her. The supervisor's a her in this scenario. She's been assistant director for 3 years. She's been at the company for 5. She thinks that the complainant is a good worker, has done a great job. She recognizes the loyalty and that sort of thing. But right now he's got a bad attitude. His attitude is down. It's affecting everybody. She wants to defend Miss K a little bit. 2 years at Cisco Systems. She was part of the selection process. This is the woman that the director has chosen, so she wants to defend that. So she says, Miss K, Cisco System, 2 years, large staff, huge, larger staff than anything we have here. And it was a difficult situation. They had problem X, Y, Z. She handled them all phenomenally. Rave reviews. She's doing great. That's part of the reason why we chose her, right? The assistant director is willing to clear things up. She's willing to address the mistrust, the distrust, the hurt feeling. She's willing to address morale. Yes, she notices morale is down. And there's a lot of rumors going around the department and the agency about downsizing. She thinks that might be contributing and certainly sees attitudes not helping any. So she's, throwing some barbs out at the complainant as well. And she's willing to discuss things, but this circumstance and situation is unacceptable and unhealthy. So she's kind of making it clear something's going to be done. Those are my notes. 1 page. It may have gone for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. She may have thrown in all kind of emotional things. There could have been several anecdotes along the way. I didn't write them all down. I just need enough to spark my memory of what she said. So now she's finished. There's a moment of silence. And I have ours. I'm going to end her opening statement. The exact same words. Moment of silence. I'm going to turn to her, look up. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this time? Again, she may go on for another 20 minutes. She may stop. No, that's it. I'm finished. Now I'm going to turn my chair back and thank them both for listening to for giving me their opening statement. And this is what my notes look like. In front of me on 1 sheet of paper, exposed to both parties, because they've both been present at this time, are my notes. 1 side complainant, 1 side respondent. And with these notes, I've begun to set myself up for the joint discussion. And these notes are going to be critical for how we organize, how we address, how we flow through joint discussion in order to create that power of a present focus. These notes become the catalyst, the pivot point, if you will, from position to the past to that movement into the present and that power of a present focus. So now I'm going to end my party's opening statement with this transition. I want to thank you both for your opening statements. As I said before, I knew nothing or I knew little, whichever one it is. If you've done the intake, you know a little. If you didn't do the intake, you know nothing. As I said before, I knew nothing about this case, and your opening statements have helped me understand more of the details. And I'm finished with party's opening statement, and I've set myself up now for joint discussion. Power of a present focus. That's where we're going to go next. So, things we want to remember in party's opening statement is it's a time for them to talk, uninterrupted fashion, using the lowest level of intervention if necessary, and I'm going to listen to you. An empowerment stage, don't be frustrated, don't be surprised if it's a lot of stuff about the past. Now is the time to get that information. We're going to use that to move forward through a power of a present focus in joint discussion. I'll see you there.